1. The invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in 1941, known as Operation Barbarossa, stretched Germany's resources thin and led to a prolonged and costly war on the Eastern Front. The harsh Russian winters, vast territory, and fierce resistance from the Soviet forces ultimately wore down the German military. 2. Strategic mistakes on the Eastern Front. Hitler's interference in military operations on the Eastern Front, such as his insistence on diverting resources to seize Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields, led to a dispersion of forces and a loss of focus. This allowed the Soviets to launch successful counteroffensives and inflict heavy losses on the German army. 3. Failure to invade Britain. Hitler's decision to postpone and eventually cancel the planned invasion of Britain, known as Operation Sea Lion, allowed the British time to regroup and rebuild their military forces. This gave the Allies a crucial base from which to launch future operations against Germany. 4. Ineffective use of resources. Hitler's obsession with grandiose projects, such as the construction of the Atlantic Wall and the development of wonder weapons like the V2 rocket, diverted resources away from the production of essential military equipment. This weakened Germany's ability to sustain a prolonged war effort. 5. Underestimating the Allied air power. Hitler underestimated the strength and effectiveness of the Allied air forces, particularly the strategic bombing campaign. This resulted in significant damage to German industrial capacity, infrastructure, and morale, hampering their ability to wage war effectively. 6. Lack of coordination and cooperation. Hitler's micromanagement of military operations and his distrust of his generals led to a breakdown in coordination and cooperation among different branches of the German military. This lack of unity and a centralized command structure hindered their ability to respond effectively to changing battlefield conditions. 7. Overextension of German forces. Hitler's decision to engage in multiple simultaneous military campaigns, such as the invasion of the Soviet Union, the North African Campaign, and the Western Front, strained Germany's resources and spread their forces thin. This ultimately weakened their ability to defend their territories effectively and sustain prolonged offensives. 8. The Battle of the Atlantic. Hitler's failure to win the Battle of the Atlantic against the Allied navies and merchant convoys disrupted German supply lines, leading to shortages of essential resources, including fuel and food. This significantly undermined Germany's war effort. 1. Underestimation of Soviet strength. Hitler and his generals underestimated the military capabilities of the Soviet Union. They believed that the Soviet forces would collapse quickly under the initial German assault. However, the Soviets had a larger and more resilient army than anticipated, with vast reserves of manpower and resources. 2. Harsh Russian winter. The German invasion, launched in June 1941, initially made significant gains. However, as the campaign dragged on, the German forces encountered the harsh Russian winter, which they were ill-prepared for. The extreme cold temperatures, coupled with inadequate winter clothing and equipment, severely hampered the German troops and their machinery. 3. Overextended supply lines. The vast distances and difficult terrain in the Soviet Union stretched the German supply lines to their limits. The German forces were unable to adequately supply their troops with the necessary provisions, ammunition, and reinforcements. This logistical strain weakened their ability to sustain a prolonged campaign and effectively support their troops. 4. Scorched earth tactics and partisan warfare. The Soviets employed a strategy of scorched earth, destroying infrastructure, resources, and anything that could be of value to the advancing German forces. They also utilized partisan warfare, with local populations conducting guerrilla attacks and sabotage operations against the German occupation. These tactics disrupted German supply lines and communications, further weakening their position. 5. Strategic mistakes and diversion of resources. Hitler diverted significant resources and attention away from the main objective of capturing Moscow. He instead focused on capturing Ukraine, Leningrad, and the Caucasus region for resources. These diversions led to a dispersion of forces and a loss of focus, allowing the Soviets to regroup and launch successful counteroffensives. 6. Soviet industrial and manpower advantage. The Soviet Union had a vast industrial base, which allowed it to quickly replace and replenish its losses in men and material. The Germans, on the other hand, faced challenges in sustaining their war effort due to limited resources and production capabilities. 7. Allied land Lend-Lease support. The Soviet Union received significant support from the Allies through the Lend-Lease program, which provided crucial supplies, equipment, and vehicles. This aid played a significant role in bolstering the Soviet war effort and offsetting some of the German advantages. 8. Failure to break Soviet morale. Despite initial successes, the German forces failed to break the morale and determination of the Soviet people. The brutalities of the German occupation, coupled with the Soviet propaganda and rallying cries for a great patriotic war, galvanized the Soviet population and fostered a strong resistance against the invaders. Hitler's aggressive expansionist policies and alliances led to the overextension of German forces and their eventual defeat in World War II through the following key factors. 1. Two-front war. Germany found itself fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, stretching its forces thin and making it difficult to defend conquered territories. 2. Lengthy supply lines. Germany's extensive territorial acquisitions required maintaining vulnerable and lengthy supply lines, which made them susceptible to disruption and strain on resources. 3. Overestimated military capacity. Hitler overestimated Germany's military capabilities, leading to the belief that swift victories were achievable. However, as the war progressed, it became clear that Germany was not equipped to sustain prolonged conflicts on multiple fronts. 4. Deterioration of alliances. Germany's alliances required diverting resources to support partners, further straining German military capabilities. 5. Misallocation of resources. Resources were diverted from military production and economic stability to support the conquest and occupation of new territories, weakening Germany's overall war effort. 6. Unified resistance. Hitler's aggressive policies provoked strong resistance from the Allied powers and occupied countries, leading to increased support for the Allies and further tilting the balance of power against Germany. 7. Strategic errors. Hitler's decision-making often led to strategic errors, such as diverting resources to secondary objectives, weakening Germany's overall position and stretching their forces further.